I'm being joined by a former spokesperson of the PDP presidential campaign, Mr. Shegun Showumi. He joins us here in our Lagos studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Showumi, for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And from our Abuja studio is the chieftain of the APC, Mr. Iko Sami. Thank you so much, Mr. Sami, for coming on the program. Of course, we'll be getting a professional perspective from Major General John Sadauna Davies. Is a former Chief of Defense Intelligence. Thank you so much, Major General, for coming tonight on the program. Let's get started. And perhaps let's get to look at it from the politician's point of view, because this conversation has been one that your party, Mr. Showumi, has said the APC is not doing the right thing. They needed to change the service. Their time is over. A lot of Nigerians are also clamoring for this change. Now that it has happened, does the President Buhari deserve any praise from your party on this?
I think it's best to just say that sometimes when you look at the Buhari presidency and his handling of all things, you almost get the impression that this is not the country we're used to. We've had presidents here, even in military regimes, and we've had civilian presidents. Never in the history of our country have we been this disorganized. In terms of the military officers that have just been left, let us thank them for the services rendered. But let us go back to what ought to have been the hierarchical procedure of their own command and control structures. Every armed forces know that there is a way people come in to the top, and there is a way they exit, and there's a way younger officers come up. There's a way they graduate them. It's as good as saying that someone gets to the office of president and he spends 4 years, and then he says he's not going to leave because it's not, for whatever reason. The army or the entire structure assumes that there is an incubation system that creates men that can take over the command. And in the first instance, they're entitled for 2 years. Okay, we adjusted the law a little bit to say we could do an improvement of it for another 2 years. They outstayed that 2 years. They have been there since 2015. They've been there now for, if you like, 7 years. And in these 7 years, you leave whatever it is that they're doing on the field and just go to the morale of the rank and file and the men who would have been waiting to take command. Are we saying that we have created an armed forces where it now runs on the ingenuity of only 1 or 2 or 3 individuals? This is the kind of cacophony that the Buhari presidency has thrown upon us. And when everybody started to talk about it, saying, look, we're not seeing any reason why you should keep them longer than their shelf date, they didn't listen. Okay, finally, when it is clear now that there's crisis all over, including internal insurrections coming up and including ethnic jingois taking over the whole country, he finally decides, like a drunken sailor that has woken up from stupor, to say, okay, he's letting them go. And then he chooses to let them go at a time when you don't even have the legislative authority that could have quickly, take them in, approve them, screen them, and say, okay, they're legally emplaced. They are on recess. It is symptomatic as to how they do everything. Well, what would we say? We'll say, welcome on board, the new guys. You have been around long enough to see what everybody in the country has been saying. The Nigerian nation is known to have some of the best armed forces in Africa. For some reason, rentier stickers, people have sat down longer than their shelf date, and therefore we know that there's broke down morale within the rank and file. Therefore, the first assignment they have is to take over control of the command and run through the process and re-energize the men of our armed forces to let them understand that the bad days are over, a new day is about to start. Then they can go back to the theater of operation and get us out of this mess quickly.
So you're disappointed? Is that what you're saying?
I would say that not necessarily are these men that were staying longer than they should have stayed, because it wasn't their responsibility to be fired.
But they say it's the prerogative of the president.
Exactly. That's exactly where we're.
If he had found it, if the president had found that these are the best guys that can handle this situation, it wasn't the right time for me to allow them.
Listen to yourself.
Hold on, Mr. Showumi. I'm asking you a question. I'm not making a judgment here. And the question I'm asking is, if the president thought that, look, these guys are the guys that would do the job the best, and he felt like this is not the right time to take them out, do you think he should have gone ahead to do in the interest of security?
I tell you what, I made a premise by saying we didn't create a Nigerian armed forces that imagines that only one man can do the job. We created a Nigerian armed forces that has a hierarchical command where almost every officer climbs the ladder and gets to a particular point where he can take command. If we ever find ourselves in a situation where we now say, oh, only 1 or 2 or 3 men can stay over and above their expected shelf date because they're the only ones that we think can do the job, then it means we don't even have an armed forces.
Let me bring Mr. Eko because it does look like you're not satisfied, even when you have clamored for the president to do this, and he has done it. But let's get Mr. Eko.
It's a little too late.
All right. Mr. Eko, let's get your view. The PDP, in a statement, says that they are demanding the probe of the former service chiefs. And a portion of that statement reads, and I quote, an immediate inquest into the tenure of the last service chief to unravel the circumstances behind the security lapses and compromises, as well as accusation of involvement in the alleged looting of funds meant for the equipping and welfare of our troops in the front. This is not the first time I'm hearing this kind of situation about the military and the issues of funding. What's your reaction to what the opposition is saying about President Buhari's decision of yesterday?
First and foremost, Shehu, we need to applaud Mr. President for doing one thing. Mr. President always sits down, take his time, make judgment of the best knowledge he's had out of his career in the military. Don't forget when he took over in 2015, PDP had given us the baggage from the military that they tried to corrupt or politicize. We sat down because Mr. President knew what governance is. He sat down. He didn't sack them immediately. He had to study most of the activities of the military, what they've done during the period of PDP, made a lot of, even kept the advisor that they actually came with, sat down, analyzed everything, and felt and chose the best hands. Understand that Mr. President has that discretion. We have to understand that constitutional discretion that President has. He has been running it. He appointed those ones with their capacity. We know the successes the army have had. We inherited mess. The country is still managing international crisis, which is having issues from, which has a clear boundary all around, surrounding Africa up to Nigeria. These armed forces have been doing their best. There were a lot of calls for Mr. President to rejig them. He decided out of his own free will, because he has the discretion to say, we're trying to change strategy or try to put in other ideas that will come in. The president can decide to change them. And he has decided to leave those ones to stay for that period of time. He has brought these new ones. And remember, Shehu, these guys are heading command from AOC in the Air Force to Naval Commands to General Officer Command. These guys have been leading, most of them have led most of these theaters all around the country. They have the experience, they have the history. They are in the chain of command. It hasn't changed. The hierarchy remains the same. The people that are due to retire, certainly will retire. The ones appointed by Mr. President would go at the time that he felt they should retire. The call for them to be investigated is very good for every government that comes and passes, whether it is appointed military officer or a government. Of course, for them to be able to scrutinize what they have done is a very good thing. But let the PDP have the power and the knowledge to scrutinize these people that have done the period that they have worked for this government based on clear correction of active governance, not just politicizing. And it's very important for us to understand that democracy is what we are running. Military is not something we should be sitting down before the TV. People that have no understanding of the defense architecture of this country to be making such criticism about our armed forces. We have over
apologies, please.
Of them. They are serving and they are dying every day. Those are not comments we should make. We should be able to control how we make comment about our armed forces.
All right, I would like you also to directly make comments about what Mr. Showumir said, because he said it's too little, too late, according to him. But we take a break. And when we return, more on the change of guard. There are some interesting scenarios. A minister in the President Buhari cabinet was the one few years ago who went to court and said you cannot appoint service chiefs without the National Assembly confirming them. According to him, he got a judgment when the court said it is null and void and unconstitutional. Has the president done a null and void action? We'll find out after this break. Don't go anywhere. We just got started, everyone.
I'm assuring the nation.
Thank you so much, everyone, and welcome back to the conversation. It's a midweek edition of Politics Today right here on Channels Television, and we are on this 1 hour stretch. So stay with us, and we're discussing security as President Muhammadu Buhari knows best to handle it. And we're looking at some of the challenges and what lies ahead of the new service chiefs. According to some lawyers, they're just nominees as far as the law is concerned. We're looking at some of this perspective. We're giving you the information and some of the knowledge that you need to take the right decision as a citizen. I have here with me Mr. Segun Showumi, a presidential spokesperson of the PDP in the 2019 elections, and Mr. Sule Ikosami from our Abuja studio is an APC chieftain. We're getting some professional perspective from Major General John Sadana Davis, a former Chief of Defense Intelligence. Before I go to the Major General, I'll allow Mr. Ikosami to take the next few seconds to react directly. You spoke generally, but there are some issues that Mr. Showumi raised earlier on. If you would like to react directly to some of those issues, it doesn't look like someone who is really happy with what the presidents had done.
You see, it's just like I said, Sheon, the constitutionality discretion is with Mr. President. The strategy comes from the National Security Council. They sit down and make these strategies and be able to extend the true chain of command of the armed forces we have in the country. So if the president, out of his discretion, felt understanding the law and how he runs the country, decided to accept the resignation of this service chief as at now, the strategy of Mr. President has to be applauded because of his history in the military. So for the fact that people needed to be scrutinized for their period of time, that's normal. We're in a democracy. People needed to be checked at every governance, even at our state level, at whatever level, we need to appraise what has happened in the past. That was able to make good judgment in the future. But it's very good for us to understand that the issues of security in this very country is something that is very sensitive. You and I have purview, we only have purview to little information we actually know about the intelligence and the security activities in this. Is not something that they disclose in the open era there. So it's very good for us to understand that he has the discretion, he has decided to accept the resignation and appoint people with exceptional experience that have been in the chain of command of the military. So that's just my view. So it's whether someone felt it's too early or too late, Mr. President has the mandate, and he has decided he understands the law. He has constitutional bearing to be able to do that, and he has just done that, accepting resignation and appointing this able man to be able to run our security architecture in the country.
Let me allow Mr. Showumi to come back. Of course,
he doesn't really understand what exactly the issues are. There's a difference between a strongman mentality in the armed forces and strong institutions. The public service rules and the harmonized terms and conditions of service of military officers, Section 26 of the Armed Forces Act, clearly defines how these guys are to be appointed. The discretionary power given to the president is to choose who, not to make a mess of the law, not to make a mess of the structure, not to ensure that we have a situation where we're given the impression that we have an armed forces that runs on only the perhaps capacity of an individual. That's where the problem is. And that's why we have a lot of mess all over the country. He needs to be reminded. As it stands today, we have a lot of issues with Amnesty International concerning the tenure of the last officers that have just left. And I have thanked them for services rendered. And I haven't blamed them for staying longer than they should have stayed, because it wasn't their power to fire them or to let them go. I'm saying that we cannot continue to run a country on an idea that we build authority, integrity, and capacity around individuals. We must insist that we're going to build it around institutions. For you to be able to do that successfully, you must play by the rules. How do you expect officers that have been waiting to take command over the years to behave? Is that supposed to suggest that we have an armed forces that once one person is incapacitated, nobody can take command? That's not how it was envisaged, not in Nigeria and not in any armed forces of the world. And be told in clear terms, we have never had it this bad.
In what area?
In all, look, if you have an armed forces that is supposed to be the pride of Africa, come to a situation where service chiefs are staying way longer than they are served. What do you think is happening to the officers that are supposed to come in command
apart from
after
that
them?
Sense, when you say we have never had equipment-wise, is it better now?
Wait. See, you will look for evidence of whatever instruction you've given your armed forces with the feeling of security within the country. If people feel secure, you will know. You won't be leaving the northeast where the challenge is and now be calling fire brigade to the southwest.
So things were better in the PDP era?
Did you have anybody in the southwest considering that he has to have taken the law into his hand and now become the ethnic jingoist to save the people because they are being slaughtered? Did you have anybody sit in Olu and whip people underneath the PDP? Did you have a situation in the Nigerian country where almost every section of the country in unison were crying, what is so special about these guys? If they've done their shelf-date, can you please let fresh hand and fresh
Mr. Shomi was saying that this is the worst we have seen as a country.
It is the worst we have seen.
Mr. Ikosami, let me get your reaction to that. Do you agree with some of the things that he said?
Shehu, I'll be very glad to tell him that we build our party and this particular convention based on the integrity of Mr. President. I'm very proud to say that. And the only way strong institution can foster if you have people with strong mind and conviction with discipline and ethics in running governance. That's the only way you can maintain good institutions. When the bad leaders are so bad, they will destroy the entire architecture or the structure of governance. And I still want to take back to your guests again, go back to understanding the discretionary powers Mr. President has. And it is very clear for you to understand that this man has a better history knowledge of the military and defense, and he has been running the military. When he was a military head of state, he ran it with exceptional discipline. When he won the election, he accepted the military that were absorbed from the PDP government when they were there. He put these ones, they were monitored. He has a very strong National Security Council. He has been running it. He understands
But Mr. Ikosami, when Mr. Showumi said that this is the worst that we have attained as a nation in terms of security, how would you react to that?
Shehu, it is not for PDP to tell you or our government what integrity is when it comes to governance. That's one thing clear. And it's not also in their place to tell Mr. President if they are looking for mandate, they should wait for election in 2023 so that they can have a mandate to appoint service chiefs every month if they so desire. Because clearly it's about power. We shouldn't politicize an area which has the responsibility to protect our own very, very, very sensitive and vital democracy that we have. It is not in their place to be able to. It is in their place to make constructive criticism, and we continue to applaud them for doing that. If they do that, but they shouldn't go to a place where they don't have mandate to do that. Mr. President has the mandate. He chose the service chief, and he will be able to accept their resignation at the time he wants to.
Just a moment. General, apologies, General. I like to trash out some of these issues with the politicians before I bring you to the fray. Just give me a few minutes, General. I'll come to you because you are the professional. We needed some knowledge on some of the things that have happened. But this is one issue that I like the politicians to talk about. And it's about the case that Mr. Festus Keyamo went to court when Mr. Goodluck Jonathan was the president. And it's about the Armed Forces Act of Section 18, which it went to court to try, and it challenged the decision of the government at the time, saying that you cannot unilaterally appoint service chief. Mr. Ikosami, from that judgment, the court ruled at the time that both houses must screen and affirm the service chief before they can be appointed. But this time around, it does look like the president had nominated them in the eye of the law and the eye of that court ruling. From what the judgment said, it says that it is unconstitutional and null and void. Your reaction?
Mr. Shehu, Mr. President, what I can tell you is that Mr. President has a discretion to make a nomination from armed forces, send them to the National Assembly for them to be able to screen them. After he has nominated them, Mr. President has been doing that. He's going to do that. That is all I can say from that point, Mr. Shehu.
Mr. Showumi.
I think the problem with the APC friend of mine is that they think that we're running a monarchy. They don't understand that discretionary powers given to a president in a constitutional democracy is trapped by the interpretation of the law. The law does not allow him that kind of fillip to do whatever he likes and then hides under the fact that I have discretional power. He cannot do these things. He is only maintaining it because of the weak institutions we have in country. And I've tried to show my friend that, look, the flip side of it is that we're going to give ourselves the impression that the entire training we give all our soldiers, suggests that only one of them per course has the capability to lead the corps. How does that even make sense to us as a people? So I'll tell you clearly, they didn't time it well. They could have either done it before the House went on recess, or they could have waited. 1 more week would not do them anything. Ordinarily, you should announce them today. They should go before the members that are empowered by law to screen them, get screened, and then they bring them to your office. You swear them in, and then they get to job. Truly, truly, are they now constitutionally able to act in those offices when the law says they can't, since they've not been screened? These are issues. But the challenge with the APC is that you can't engage them on anything. They have only one answer for all things. Buhari is right, everybody is wrong. And that's not how democracy works.
All right, just a moment. Let me bring the General in. General, thank you so much for your patience. And let me get your views. Perhaps let's begin the conversation from this point. The appointment or the nomination of the service chiefs. In fact, in all of the political appointment, the law has somewhat categorized service chiefs appointment as a political appointment because they are perhaps the only political appointment that has to go through the 2 chambers of the National Assembly. Ministers don't have to go through both chambers of the National Assembly. But from your view and your experience, we saw things happen under the Obasanjo government, under the Yar'Adua government, part of what President Goodluck Jonathan did, which was corrected at some point in the last lap. But in this sense, what is your view on what President Buhari has done?
Thank you very much. Like you rightly said, these are the only appointments that go through the scrutiny of the House of Assembly. And that is because the appointments are such that this has to be ratified before the officers take their posts. And because of the enormity of the task ahead of them, this is very, very important. But then, let's look at it. Like you said, the nomination has to come from the presidency, and the ratification has to come from the House. As it is now, the president has done his nomination, and we are waiting for the ratification. And if this is done, then I don't see any problem with what is happening. What has been done is the president has the prerogative to decide when to remove them or when to appoint them in such circumstance. And like I've said in the past, the issue of removing or appointing shouldn't be what we should dabble into. We should look at the whole security architecture of the country and see what is important, what is primary, what is the priority for us. And at this point, if the president feels this is the time to remove the service chiefs, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because the entire Security Council is under his jurisdiction. The entire security architecture of the country is under his command. And then if this is the time he feels they should go, so be it. And I mean, it's the prerogative of any president, whether before him or after him, this will still happen.
So let's take a look at technicalities of what the president did. Would you say that those were round pegs in round O's, talking about those 4 appointments?
Yeah, these service chiefs were appointed yesterday, and within this period, the social media and the newsprint and TV media have gone agog with various comments. And I will tell you that the comments are more positive. They are more positive than the negative ones. Yeah. Everybody really agrees that these appointments were given to the right people. Now, if you take them one after the other, starting with the Chief of Defense Staff, you will agree with me because of his the various appointments that he has held, which negates the impression that there is stagnation in the military because the other service chiefs stay so long. If you could recall that he was one of the very first officers that established the military command center in the Northeast when the president came to power in 2015. And from then he was appointed the theater commander. He served there meritoriously, And everybody, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, has been acknowledged as one of the best chief of defense staff, theater commanders within this period under review. And then from there, he even commanded the multinational joint task force. And then he came to the defense headquarters as the chief of training and operations before he now went to TRADOC, that is Training and Doctrine Command in Mina. So if you follow this track record, you will see that while he was in the defense headquarters, he commanded 2 operations, the Operation Delta Save in the Niger Delta and Operation Safe Haven in Jos Plateau and some other neighboring states. So which means virtually he has fair knowledge of the entire security challenges that we have. If you take the Chief of Army Staff, for instance, he has held other appointments also, but very important amongst this is the General Officer Commanding of 82 Division, which has to do also with challenges in the Niger Delta. And then he also commanded the theater too. Now for the Chief of Air Staff, he also was a commander in Yola, the Air Force Command there, where you have their tactical forward base. And he has a stint also in the in the Northeast. So, well, with all this, especially since we are treating the challenges in the Northeast, you will agree with me that these appointments are very, very well done. These are very square pegs in square holes. And for the Chief of Naval Staff, he also has his own merits. More so, they are in the brown waters of the Northeast in Baga, and I know he held some appointments also that will enable him to carry out his new appointment.
You understand how some of these things work in the military, but I'm a bit curious. And so as many of Nigerians, especially as relating to the Chief of Army Staff, who in 2017 was fired at the front line by General Buratai, who was the Chief of Army Staff at the time, for, according to him, failing to carry out the order of getting Shekau, the leader of the Boko Haram. He said he was supposed to have caught him dead or alive within 40 days. After that, he was redeployed at that time. And this is the man that has been made the Chief of Army Staff. What's your reaction to that? When that kind of thing happened, what could have happened on the ground or behind the scenes that we do not know?
Thank you very much. I was in service when he was appointed and redeployed, but I cannot remember him being redeployed because he failed to get Shekau out of his enclave. And I also remember very well that when he was redeployed, he was given some accolades by the Chief of Army Staff for having contributed his own much to the peace we seek in the Northeast. Now, the question I will ask is, military postings are redeployments for reasons that the authority itself knows better. And if we say he was removed because he didn't perform poorly, the officers that were appointed after him, have they been able to change the status quo in the Northeast? Has there been any difference in the security architecture there? So which is to say that we can't really say that it's because he didn't perform. If they had come in and brought Shekau out, then we will say, yes, the present Chief of Army Staff underperformed. So if you look at it, Irabo himself served there, played his role, and was redeployed. Amahope was also in the theater. He played his role, and he was redeployed. So their appointment is not as a result of the failure of the outgoing service chiefs. It's only to reinvigorate the security architecture in the Northeast. That's the main thing, is to bring in new ideas to see how we can overcome this. So if we begin to talk of failure and successes, we need a whole gamut of statistics to be able to put this in the right perspective.
All right. General, there is one thing that is very important, which, of course, is part of your expertise, and that is intelligence, which some of the military officers had complained that we are lacking. We have a challenge in that area. I'd like you to comment on that, but we need to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about the security challenges in the country and the handling and approach of President Muhammadu Buhari in the last 5 years. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk more after now. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get started again. Major General Sodano Davis has been talking to us about this. Let me get a very quick reaction from you in terms of the issues of intelligence. It doesn't look like it was a total overhaul of the rank and file of the hierarchy, the leadership of the military, in the sense that it was the top brass, but then we have other offices. The NSA is still there, and some other offices, the NDI head of the Defense Intelligence, all of them are still there. But a major problem that we have heard is the issue of lack of intelligence, lack of coordination is on one hand also. But tell us about the issues of intelligence and perhaps if we should expect anything to change with these 4 men that are now at the helm of affairs.
Thank you very much. There is no operation actually that can be carried out without adequate intelligence. And this intelligence, of course, does not only come from the military intelligence resources, it also comes from other civil intelligence resources. And the way of getting this together is to have a collaboration with all these intelligence services, both civil and military, in order to come up with a plan that will solve the mission at hand. Now, the problem in the Northeast isn't really lack of intelligence, but lack of sufficient intelligence. And the military has its own intelligence architecture in place. But then remember that this whole Northeast challenge is not just an internal security challenge. It goes beyond the shores of our country. And that means we need the cooperation of other intelligence services outside Nigeria. Now, when I was in service, the challenges we have from our partners, especially in our European partners, is that the intelligence they give to us come in very late. And we need real-time information. We need real-time intelligence. And when you give us an intelligence that is even 1 hour late, it becomes really not usable. Now, within our own intelligence architecture, we've been able to put things in place to get information through even the state government intelligence machinery, through the JTF machinery, and even the locals. But there is still room for improvement in the sense that the Boko Haram people are terrorists who live within the society. And if the society cooperates well enough, we still have a lot of intelligence that can be gotten from them that will help in shortchanging this whole issue. So we need to really overhaul that aspect of the cooperation between the civil and military intelligence architecture. It needs an overhaul.
General, I'd like to bring in back the gentleman who have been on the program with you. But in 30 seconds, if you can tell me this, have we gotten to that sophistication where in one room, with the use of drones and other technology, has our military gotten to that point that they can monitor things live, just like you're watching on TV and watching a live TV? Have we gotten to that point? Did we get to that point?
Yes, certainly we've gotten to that point because the Air Force have drones that patrol the whole theater of operation. And then I am aware that some of the commanding officers also have their own drones that they can monitor the battlefield. So, but then, like I said, we still need a lot of equipment. In terms of the drones, like you said, we need drones with very, very high capacity payloads. We need those that have high endurance, that can stay longer in the skies both day and night. And then we need those that can fight blindly or do their reconnaissance blindly. That is both either in storm, at night, during the rain. So some of these things are lacking. So this makes our soldiers to be blind in most of these operations. And that also gives a lot of challenge to the Air Force, because when you have drones that can only operate in the daytime, I'm not saying that's all they have, but if that's what you have, then it means you can't operate at night. So therefore, there is need to, like I said, to overhaul the equipment holding of all the services. If this is done and we're able to match foot for foot with the Boko Haram people, both day and night, and then we'll be able to protect our troops from sudden attacks, then we will be there in very short time.
All right.
If this is not done, we will still be repeating the same mistakes that we are experiencing now.
Let me bring back, gentlemen, Mr. Showumi. What are your expectations? Are you hopeful that it is a new era for our security? You heard the general that we've got some men of class that are now in charge of things under this Buhari government going forward. Do you have high hopes?
I'll just tell it to you this way. Every soldier knows that an armed forces or an army is as efficient, as capable, as able to get victory as the quality of the man that is commanding them. I'll share a small story with you. In the build-up to the 2019 election, I sat His Excellency Atiku Abubakar down one day and I asked him one question. I said, "Sir, this war is not getting finished. You're a civilian. What needs to happen?" You know what he said? He said, "We're using the wrong approach. It's not all things that must be about soldiering. You must be thinking about technology." And I asked him, "Which ones?" He said, "There's something called the low Earth orbit satellite that can look into the ground from the sky." I asked him, "Which other one?" He said, "There are sensors that can stay at the borders, that can beam, and all of that." And then he said, "I have been very curious that we're fighting on a very flat plane, and it has taken this long. Something is not adding up." And then I asked him, "What about the Fulanis?" He said, "There is no grouping of Fulanis that doesn't have an Aldo. Have you engaged them?" What am I trying to say to you? It is the mentality and the attitude of the commander-in-chief that determines whether you can have an efficient army.
What else do you want the president to do?
I've just rolled out some. They can take it and go and figure out how to get that done. Of course, some other people in the country...
You think he's not doing all that?
I'm thinking that the problem with the Nigerian nation right now under President Buhari is that they have locked themselves into a room running on the very little capacity to think that is available to them. And they have shut out too many people that can help in the thinking process. We're talking about an asymmetrical war here. It's now in Oshun, it's now in Ogun, it's everywhere. How do you even know that we're not demonizing a race just because of elements of Boko Haram that are now doing havoc in these places that we're just calling Fulanis? This is not the time to pamper a commander-in-chief. This is the time to tell him, "Mr. Man, we brought you in here because we thought you had the service record. Now lead. You promised us you're going to lead from behind. What are you doing?" So for the men that have just come in, I'll just say to them, "Gentlemen and officers, thank you for services rendered. Now you have been given the baton. Stop on your strip and go and get us victory. This is the Nigeria of General Sani Abacha. This is the Nigeria of General Obasanjo. This is the Nigeria of even General Buhari. This is the Nigeria of General Babangida. What the hell has become of us?"
All right. Let me allow Mr. Ikosami to respond to what, I mean, if he says, if Mr. Showumi is saying all of these things, it does look to me that perhaps there are more to be done. How do you react to him?
You see, Shehu, it's very clear Mr. President has been using multi-faceted approach in the strategy of running this government. We know the formation of the JTF. We know how the intelligence has been gathered, even within the community shelves surrounding our borders around the country. We know all these things have been going. But I can put it this way, Shehu. This is Nigeria for all of us. And when we go back to the history before the coming of Mr. President, it's a discussion we can have with a lot of funny laugh, because a lot of mess that has happened that time. But I can call on my brother and all our Nigerians that Mr. President has a mandate to run this country. He needs our support. The armed forces are the best of minds. I can tell you from today, our defense company in Kaduna is producing vehicles that you are seeing in the war front now. There are a lot of technological advancement. We have over 21 aircraft that are meant for this war fighting in the Air Force. We have several of our airmen and men that are training all around the world. A lot of investment has been done in the architecture of our defense. You need to actually go into the detail for you to understand what is actually going on. But we need to call all Nigerians to come together. We don't have any other country. We only have one president at a time. We need to give him all the support so that we can continue to succeed the way Mr. President has been piloting the success of this very country. In that, I can tell my brother, it is not time for campaigning, it's not time for politicking. This is time for critical thinking, and Mr. President is ahead of that. He has the best team. If you look at the entire ministry, the entire cabinet of Mr. President, you know that we have the best hands around the country. You know that they are all working together. This is the only president that has allowed independence in virtually every realm of government. This is the only president that is even calling our PDP brothers, allow the local government to move autonomously, allow the legislature to independently.
Mr. Ikosami, yeah,
this is the only president that has decided to allow autonomy virtually in every part. So we are calling on everybody to come together, support Mr. President, support his vigil, and now wait for the campaigning time so that we can actually come out and campaign and see who actually take the mantle in 2023.
We're due to go now, but I'd like General to comment as a final word for us tonight on these the perceived delay in replacement of the service chief. Has there been any kind of distortion, or could that have caused any structural upset within the rank and file of the military hierarchy or the leadership of the military? Maybe you can do that for us in 30 seconds.
Well, like I said, at any point in time, we are all trained. We are all trained officers. We have our various seniority from the academy. And at any point in time, only one officer actually will become a chief of army staff or chief of naval staff, chief of air staff or chief of defense staff. And that is not to say that when these people are appointed, everybody goes home. No. We all are given various appointments in the hierarchy of command that will facilitate the command of those who are at the top. So at any time, the service exigencies calls for redeployment. And that means there's nobody who is not assigned to any particular office, whether in the field as a commander or as a staff. So the delay does not make any, it doesn't really stop the functioning of the armed forces, because once they are appointed, what the president has done now, like I said, is he didn't remove the service chiefs because they didn't perform. He brought in these new people to reinvigorate the existing architecture. And they have to be picked from the existing officer cadre that are in the armed forces. And they came from different commands. They were not idle, they were not retired or brought from retirement, but they came from different departments of the armed forces. So the delay didn't really stop anything. And if you look at their stint in the Northeast, they all performed to the best of their ability before they were redeployed. Now they have been asked to come back.
All right, General.
And I'm sure when...
Thank you so much, Major General John Sedona Davis, former Chief of Defense Intelligence. Thank you so much for your thoughts tonight, as well as Mr. Segun Showumi and Mr. Sule Ikosami. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight. Well, that's our show for tonight on this midweek edition of Politics Today on Channel 24. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'm Sean Kimale.